All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Good morning to everyone, or good evening to everyone, depending on where you're located. This is our first weekday live chat, and we've timed this especially for all our viewers in Australia, in Asia, in the East, as well as in the United States. If you're up late at night and you're catching us as well. Everyone in Europe, well, it could be early morning, like for you, Alexander, very early morning, or for like me and Peter, it could be the beginning of.
We're trying to compete with the lame liberal comedy.
Yeah.
Okay, so give us a shot at that.
Give us a shot. Well, we hope you guys enjoy this live chat. We'll try to keep this to about an hour in length, and we will be having our normal live chat on Sunday, our big one as well. So this is not the replacement for that. We're going to try to focus on a couple of key topics and a couple of trending news items that we've had during the week. And I would like to welcome everyone here. If you guys hear me okay, let me know on the live chat. And let's welcome Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk in Moscow. Hello, Peter.
With my dogs, as you can probably hear.
All right. And let's welcome editor-in-chief of the Duran in London, Alexander Mercouris.
Hello, and great to be back on the show.
All right. Paul Silence says he hears us loud and clear. Susan Contour, 3 a.m. Wow, Susan. Thank you for joining us. Okay, everybody. Peter, Alexander, obviously the big news item that we've been covering is Brexit, but I'd also like to get into the Mueller investigation, how it's connected to Theresa May and the UK as well, and what's going on there. And then we can touch upon Saudi Arabia and the recent sanctions, whether they're real or just for show, that have been imposed on, I think, about 15 Saudi officials. So, Peter, how do you think we should kick this off? You want to kick this off with let's go Mueller. Let's go Mueller in the UK.
Yeah. It looks like, and we've been saying it for a while, but I think it's with more certainty now that he's wrapping it up here. Of course, Politico, The Hill, and other public websites are saying that more indictments are looming. This could include Don Jr. I think it'll all,
Roger Stone,
Oliver Stone. I think it's all going to be procedural. It's going to be a perjury charge. I think that, I've said this all along, if there was really anything to be known about this, because this is not predicated on a crime, it's really, in that sense, this whole investigation is a farce. You have an investigation when a crime is committed and you find out what happened. Here, there's no predicate. There's nothing to hang this investigation on. So maybe some more Russian bloggers and hackers and stuff like that, which will never come to trial. It's all going to end with a whimper. And basically, in my mind, Mueller is going to be passing the baton to the newly elected Democrats in Congress. So it's going to be kind of interesting. You're going to end with one, and then you're going to start with another. So they're not going to let this go. They're not going. Though the American people are remarkably uninterested in this. We have to point out it wasn't even part of the midterm election cycle. They didn't run on that. The whole Russia thing went into a pause position, and now they're bringing it back up. So if there was anything that Mueller could uncover, it would have been leaked, folks, a long time ago. So it'll be procedural stuff, of course. The liberal media will make a big deal about it, particularly if it's around Trump's family. They'll run with that for a while. But there's going to be a lot of other investigations going on here. And I think that's one of the things is that the Democrats want. They don't want to have these competing things. They want this one done, and they want to start up with something fresh. Okay, so I think that's where it's going to go. Again, if there was any there, we would have heard about it over a year ago. So on Crosstalk, we've stopped doing it because it's a non-story. Okay, it's a propaganda ploy. It's not a real story.
Blizzard Veritas wants to know, Peter, is that your dog in the background?
All three of them, yes. They have, this is my morning look, okay? It's 11:05 Moscow time, but my dogs have the 9 o'clock crazies. They just get it in their mind. They got to run, and they'll pop up here soon, okay? But they've got to run around. They've got too much energy. So, yes, the dogs are here with us.
All right, Alexander, connect Russiagate, the Russia hoax, the deep state in the U.S., connected to the deep state in the U.K., Trump's view of Theresa May, and what's going on with the Mueller investigation and how Trump is seeing Theresa May, we'll get into it about Theresa May very soon.
Well, indeed. Let's actually just start quickly with Theresa May, because, of course, she telephoned Trump. He was actually on Air Force One to congratulate him on the midterm results. And he was in a foul mood. He just got back from Paris, where we've done videos about this. He really didn't like the way Macron behaved, and he was in no mood to get anything from congratulations from Theresa May. And apparently he absolutely tore into her, shredded her on Brexit. He shredded her on all kinds of things. But of course, at the back of his mind, he's probably, in fact, he's unquestionably very angry about the British role in Russiagate, which he knows all about.
He knows all about it.
He knows all about it, exactly. Now, of course, this has not been talked about very much, but it is substantial. The big document, which really gets everything going with the collusion charge in Russiagate, is this extraordinary dossier that was put together by this ex-British spy, Christopher Steele, which made all these extraordinary, sensational allegations about what members of the Trump campaign were up to. And we've seen how Mueller went against two of them. He went against Roger Stone, who we're now hearing is going to be indicted on some process crime, probably perjury. We're hearing the same. We saw the same with Michael Cohen. And of course, the whole thing, the whole Steele dossier turned out to be a tissue of fabrications. It was just completely unverifiable. It was utter nonsense. And it wasn't just that, which was utter nonsense. We've also got the other things that also came from Britain, which are perhaps less nonsense, but rather sinister, like the British government spying on George Papadopoulos, getting British agents like probably Joseph Mifsud. This is this mysterious Maltese professor who's got British intelligence connections. Stephen Halpern, the American academic who's, however, based at Britain's leading university, Cambridge University, acting as provocateurs. And then there is Bob Hannigan, who is the head of GCHQ, the big British intelligence agency that imitates, that works with the NSA. He goes off to the United States with a big dossier right in the middle of the presidential election and warns all the people in the United States that Donald Trump or his campaign are somehow implicated with the Russians. So there is a very big British footprint in this story. We haven't got anywhere near to the bottom of it. Donald Trump knows about it because, of course, he gets a lot of information, and he was furious with Theresa May.
You know, one thing that I have in my mind here, we all know that Trump said he wanted all these FISA documents made public, and he has the power to do that. Now, apparently, the national security people that don't have his presidency interests at hand, I believe, but like Pompeo, and we have John Bolton. Pompeo has his own political ambitions, always confused Nikki Haley, people like that. But I wonder if Trump is thinking about waiting for the Mueller report to come out, and then he will release a lot of these documents here, because he'll be able to say, what about this part of the story that you were supposed to be investigating? You go after people for tax fraud, you go after people for procedural violations, but you didn't go after this. That could be the counter, and it will be very powerful, but they have Fox News that will will amplify that. Fox has done an excellent job when it comes to Russiagate, okay? I really commend them for that, okay? Because MSNBC and CNN just, they cherry pick what they want, okay? Everything negative. So Trump still has some cards to play because he has the documents, okay? He doesn't have to spin. He can say, well, read for yourself.
Yeah.
I think one of the things he's counting on. And with Theresa May calling him to congratulate him, I mean, he must have blown a refuses. I mean, your government, your people tried to undermine me in my election, and you're congratulating me now?
No, exactly.
I mean, what an insult. What a true insult.
Yeah.
And we know that Donald doesn't take fools lightly, okay?
No.
So he's got some cards to play here. I want to see those documents, because when those documents are released to all of you watching this here, Carter Page, Papadopoulos, they will go to the bank, you guys, because the U.S. government violated their civil rights, and with foreign powers colluding. That's why George Papadopoulos, I don't know what the situation at this moment is, but withdrawing his plea deal, because he knows, you know, it's like he knows the winning lottery number. He just has to wait for that lottery to play.
Yeah. Can I just add, there's also an Australian footprint. The Australian ambassador was also heavily implicated in setting up Papadopoulos. It was he who apparently tipped off, although the Australian government who tipped off the US intelligence agencies that Papadopoulos was making all these claims about having heard how the Russians were going to leak Hillary Clinton's emails in a drunken party in a London club somewhere. So Australia is involved. And can I also say, just to add about Australia and Russiagate for our Australian viewers, there's also, of course, a very good commentary about Russiagate in Australia from people like Caitlin Johnson, which I follow closely.
Alexander, go into that a little bit. Now that we saw the Paris summit, we saw Macron and Trump get into it. We have Angela Merkel out. Theresa May looks like she's on her last legs.
Yeah.
Who's really left? Trudeau in Canada. Who's left of the Obama rat pack, so to speak? You know, the group of Cameron and Merkel and Trudeau and all these neoliberals. Well, and what's Trump got to look forward to now?
Well, it's actually very, very interesting, because let's go. You're talking about the Obama thing. I mean, let's reel back to 2014 when the Ukrainian crisis exploded. I mean, we have Cameron in Britain, he's gone. We have Hollande in France, he's gone. We've had Angela Merkel in Germany. She's sliding. I mean, she's definitely now on her way out.
All intents and purposes, she's gone.
She's gone. Theresa May, who replaced David Cameron, well, she's probably hours or days away from being gone. And of course, Renzi in Italy, he's also gone. And there was the Canadian Prime Minister, Halper, who preceded Trudeau. And of course, he's gone also. So they've all gone.
Wait, who's still there? Assad.
Exactly. And let's not forget Vladimir Putin, who all those sanctions and all that demonization was directed against. And in the United States, Obama is gone. And Hillary Clinton, his intended successor, she didn't get in. So it's really striking to see how they've all tumbled. Now, Trudeau, I think, is in some ways the person. Well, Trudeau and Macron are the two people who are carrying the torch for the sort of Obama, Obama style.
You want them on your team? Those two clowns. You want them those clowns on your team?
And I mean, Trump hates them both. I mean, I say hates. I mean, I think he is furious with Macron. I mean, that is absolutely obvious after the shambles of Paris. And I don't think he likes, well, I mean, he said awful things about Trudeau.
Which the interesting thing is that when Macron was giving that stupid speech, I mean, absolutely ahistorical, I mean, didn't make any logical sense whatsoever. Trump didn't even have his earpiece in. He wasn't even listening to it. It's just like, what's going on here? When's this over? He wasn't even listening to it. No, this is very, very interesting here, because this is how this neoliberal world is collapsing in on itself, because its policies don't work for the people, okay? And sooner or later, it doesn't work for the leadership that spews out all of this nonsense, all right? And this is what's happening. the liberal media interpreting what Macron had to say. I mean, really, give me a break. This is, he and his mom, excuse me, his wife. Okay, I mean, this is it's just a charade. I mean, it's a complete shambles here. Yeah. I mean, lecturing people on their values. No, it's these people in power that have no values whatsoever except for self-interest. Okay. For our non-American viewers here, these people, they live in protected zip codes, okay? They have no idea how the rest of the world lives, okay? And so, and this whole issue about nationalism is an insult to, it's insulting to your intelligence, okay? I mean, their understanding of nationalism has only one definition in one point in time. Well, nationalism that's really one of the hallmarks of modernity, okay? I know these folks want to go into the postmodern world, but most people still live in the modern world, and the nation state is what gives us a lot of protections and a great sense of pride. What, do you have pride in the World Bank? Do you have pride in the IMF? Do you have pride in the EU? Do you have pride in NATO? Of course you don't. You have pride in your community, with your family, with your friends, and your country. There's nothing diabolical about that at all. It's because people aren't and are indoctrinated not to be is the crisis of our time.
Peter, I was watching, I think it was Tucker Carlson or Laura Ingraham, and one of the arguments during the whole nationalist speech by Macron, and when they were debating about it's a dog whistle, when Trump says nationalist, it's a dog whistle. And one of the guests said, well, just look at what the word Nazi stands for. It's the Nationalist Party of Germany. So obviously there's that connection. I always wonder, how come people never focus on the fact that the word also has socialist in it?
Exactly.
What are your comments on that?
I mean, the thing is that obviously nationalism, see, this is really the interesting thing here, is that all of us, and I hope our viewers agree with us here, is that the right can go too far. We know that. It did. It did. And it's called fascism. Okay, when you have ethno-nationalism, that means people are excluded. A more common sense understanding of nationalism is inclusive. Benedict Anderson, a great historian, he wrote a book called Imagined Communities. Okay, and it's a history of nationalism. It doesn't focus all of its time on the extreme racist forms of a nationalist movement. That happened in Germany. That happened in Eastern Europe. Most people forget that, okay? These were not the fascist parties there. All through Europe there were. I mean, if you look at, you can, with microfiche, you can look how popular Hitler was in the West with intellectuals, and Stalin and his model as well. It's intellectuals that lead us the wrong way because they're ideologically possessed. So the nationalism, you have to separate that very large experience in the modern period and not just focus on one extreme form of it, okay? And you're absolutely right, Alexander Christoforou. What about the S in the National Socialist German Workers' Party, okay? It was fundamentally of the left as well. Its economic system it was very corporatist. So, I mean, I was trained as an academic historian. When someone says nationalism, I mean, the first thing I think of isn't Germany and it isn't Italy, okay? I look, you guys are Greek, okay? It took Greek nationalism, a nationalist spirit, to become a nation state away from the Ottoman Empire. You guys weren't Nazis. Your ancestors weren't, okay? I'm pretty sure of that, okay? And so don't conflate the two. And this is what the left does all the time because they don't know anything about history. All they want, see, the left is one big dog whistle. That's all they are. And it insults people that know history, and it insults people that love their country, all right? Patriotism is the opposite of nationalism. What the hell does that mean? Look it up in dictionary. Come on. What? And everyone's bobbing their heads. Oh, okay, need I say more? I mean, it's just ridiculous. I think, Donald Trump's America first. Yeah, well, because I would hope that the Prime Minister of the UK would say the UK first, even though Theresa May doesn't do that, we can talk about Brexit more. I mean, giving everything away. She's not a good national leader. Macron, well, what country comes first for him? Belgium? Japan? But of course, it can't be France, I guess, because you'd be a nationalist. It's just stupid. I mean, you know, the French president doesn't have better speechwriters than that, really?
Well said, Peter. Alexander, is Theresa May a nationalist?
Well, incredible as it sounds, she talks an awful lot about, you know, doing the best for Britain, doing the interests of Britain. I don't think she's any kind of nationalist in any sense that I would understand the term. Certainly, she's certainly not somebody who fights very hard for Britain's corner. But in one important respect, I mean, one could say that she does sort of shave into some of the nationalism that we're seeing, because she's extremely anti-immigrant. And the one thing that she has secured in her negotiations with the EU is that she's managed to persuade them to agree to no free movement. So this has been a very important thing in Britain, as it is in many places. And that's the one thing she got. She didn't get anything else, but she did get that. And she's well known in Britain for taking a very, very strong anti-immigrant position.
Yeah, but Alexander Mercouris, but okay, fine. She won on that, but she gave the economy away. So what's it worth?
I mean, it's not, Peter. If you look at the newspapers here in Britain, if you listen to, I mean, we're in a political crisis here at the moment. I mean, everybody's trashing her, and everybody's trashing the agreement that she's done. But you know, on that specific issue, she does conceive of herself as somebody, I suppose, who's protecting something.
Yeah, but under the agreement that she's pushing is that it's the worst of all possible worlds.
Oh, absolutely. Well,
you're not really out, and then you don't have any control over trade. I mean, what national leader does that?
Well,
I mean,
we have
obvious that this is worse.
We are far worse off. We are far worse off than if we'd stayed in the European Union. Because I mean, if we stayed in the European Union,
you had to say at least when you're in the Union.
We had to say, and we had an option to leave. What she's signing us up to will make it impossible if it's agreed. If it's signed off, it will make it impossible for
what Theresa May is
to leave.
You can sign away the economic sovereignty of the UK to a bunch of bureaucrats. Well, this is worse.
Well, it is.
Peter, is the goal to go to another referendum, you think?
Alexander Mercouris, help me out on this, because I mean,
I want to get Alexander.
They voted. They voted.
Yeah,
okay,
Alexander, we did a lot of videos on this, and we're going to go to Alexander right after. But I want to hear Peter's take on Brexit real quick. What do you think, Peter, on it?
They voted. Okay, they voted. I mean, what are they going to do? Pull the European Union trick? Keep voting until they get the answer they want? We've seen this repeatedly. Okay.
Expand on that. Expand on that. That's the point. Yeah.
Theresa May never had guts for this. Okay. I mean, I have to really wonder about her state of mind. She keeps saying there will be Brexit, there will be, but she's done almost everything possible, with maybe the exception of the immigration thing, but everything in the reverse direction of making sure they do stay in. They just don't call it that. Okay. I mean, this is it's. You know, I've always not understood non-alcoholic beer. I mean, what's the point, okay? And this is what we have. We kind of have like a non-alcoholic Brexit, okay? Has no impact at all, okay? What's the point of going through it if you don't get a buzz, okay? I'm sorry for the analogy, but that's how I feel about it. No, it's obvious. The thing is that Theresa May, she has one card, and everybody knows it, and she's scaring the hell out of it. That Marxist Jeremy Corbyn's going to be prime minister. That's her only card she's got. And I think people find her so pathetic right now. It's not going to work. All right. Alexander Mercouris, I'm pretty sure she brought in all the party leaders one at a time and say, the Marx is at the door of 10 Downing Street at my house. He's about to move in. Yeah. That's what she's doing, scaremongering.
Yes.
Alexander, do you think the whole plan all along was to go to get to another vote, another referendum? And one of the viewers, I'm looking for the chat message right now, said that Jeremy Corbyn is actually a secret Brexiteer.
Yes.
He's a hardcore Brexiteer. What do you make of that?
Right, let's start with Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn has been opposed to the EU most of his political life, nearly all of his political life. We had a referendum back in 1975, believe it or not, to join the EU, and we voted in that referendum to join, but Jeremy Corbyn voted to leave. He didn't want to join. And he's been consistently opposed to the EU, and I think he still is, basically, because from his perspective, the EU is a cabal of capitalist free market states. If he becomes prime minister, he wants to carry out certain social and economic reorganizations in Britain, which will run into opposition from EU directives and EU policies and EU bureaucrats. So he would much rather see Britain outside of the EU so that he has a free hand to do the things he wants to do as prime minister. So I think that is right. Now, as to whether or not the agenda all along was to have a second referendum, actually, in the case of Theresa May, I don't think so. What has happened is she has mismanaged the negotiation so badly. She's made such an utter mess of it for all sorts of reasons, that what people are now saying, and she's now opened up this whole argument, people are now saying, look, since we're going to be worse off with this deal that Theresa May has negotiated than we would have been if we'd stayed in, this is a good moment to take a step back, look at it all over again, and have a second referendum. But of course, the people who are saying that are overwhelmingly those who didn't want to leave the European Union in the first place. Now, I don't think they are the dominant group within the Conservative Party or within Theresa May's cabinet, and I don't think that was the agenda she was following. We mustn't assume with someone like Theresa May that she has got some kind of deep plan. She is not clever enough for that.
She's not deep. Okay, but Alexander Mercouris, what's going to happen with this November 25th signing? I mean, what's going on?
Well, okay, right. Now, the November 25th signing is supposed to be the summit, the European Council meeting, where they're all supposed to sign this thing off. In order for that to happen, the British government must support it. If Theresa May is gone within the next few days, then it is impossible for that summit to happen, because it is inconceivable that any new British Conservative Prime Minister will want to endorse this plan. So at that point, that 25th of November summit is toast. It's over.
And what does the EU do?
What does the EU do? The EU, well, first of all, they'll be very disappointed because they've got a plan now, which, as we've discussed in our programs, gets Britain exactly where they want it. They've got Britain in a customs union so they can go on selling their goods to the EU, the German cars and the Italian refrigerators and all of these things that the British buy in such vast quantities. At the same time, they don't have the British in the EU central institutions, the European Council, the Council of Ministers, the European Parliament, where they are the noisiest, most disruptive group within the EU. So the EU will be very, very disappointed if they lose this deal. But if they do lose this deal, well, they made very clear what they're going to do. They're going to sit back and wait for the British to come back and see what sort of proposals the British come back with. My own
hand in hand.
Well,
hand in hand.
Well, that's what the EU is expecting. Now, there are the hardline Brexiters, people like Nigel Farage and Jacob Rees-Mogg, who are saying, let's not actually bother going back to the EU cap in hand. Let's accept the fact that there's going to be a no-deal Brexit in March. In other words, a Brexit in which no deal has been negotiated with the EU. And let us instead prepare for that. Let's use the remaining 4 months to try to get Britain organized so that when we do leave the EU, there is as little disruption as possible. Now, that is a prospect, I have to say, that terrifies an awful lot of people in Britain within the political elite. I'm not sure it terrifies ordinary people very much, but the elite has persuaded itself, or pretends to be persuaded, that if you leave on in March without a deal, all sorts of horrible things will start to happen. I'm not convinced that's true, by the way. And I mean, I understand what Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nigel Farage are saying.
Peter,
let me ask Alexander Mercouris something. I mean, if we had a general election in between the March date, I mean, what would, assuming that Jeremy wins, what I have to imagine he's got some people working on a plan.
Yeah,
okay? He's going to want to get out, get out and get into the race with 2 feet hitting the ground. Okay, because got lots going to be expected of him.
Yes. Yes. Well, straight away. I mean, I mean, in Britain, everything is, in some ways, fast. I mean, things can happen very quickly in Britain. But to hold a general election, we would be looking at a process of about, at a minimum, 3 weeks, just to conduct the election campaign properly. Probably we'd be looking at more like, 6 weeks of political, paralysis whilst that election is underway. Given that the time frame, the runway before Britain leaves in March is so small, I think the only thing Jeremy Corbyn could do if he is elected Prime Minister is he would have to ask the Europeans, can we please extend the period in March? In other words, can you give us another 2 months or even longer, so that I can get my act together, get my party together, and move with this thing forward. Now, I say that because Jeremy Corbyn himself, I am sure, would rather see Britain out of the EU. Most of his party doesn't. The Labour Party is an overwhelmingly pro-Europe party. So for Jeremy Corbyn to simply say, well, look, I'm just become Prime Minister, let's go for a no-deal Brexit, is a politically unsustainable position for him. If I have to say quickly what I think Jeremy Corbyn would prefer, I think he'd prefer the Tories, the Conservatives, to carry on dealing with this mess right up until March, for Britain to leave the EU then, and then for the general election to happen. That is the optimal position from his point of view.
Peter, 2 questions. Actually, we got a super chat as well from Happy Zorro. Thank you for that super chat. And Peter, the first question is, what is your dog's name? That little dog that you carry, that you brought up to your shoulder.
His name is Buddy, and it's his birthday today. He's 1 year old.
Wow.
All right. A lot of users are asking, and I'm sure they're going to wish Buddy a happy birthday. And Peter, why is the U.S. mainstream media not covering any of this Brexit stuff?
Well, I think it's it's a symptom of American exceptionalism. It's those colonials out there mucking about and they're still under our control no matter what. Okay, so I mean it's more of a skirmish out there. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding in the American media. These are there are so many massive changes going on in the world that are really will change the lives of so many people, and all of this doesn't bode well for the United States and as its perceived interest. I mean, I would love to see NATO collapse. I would like to see the United States get out of Europe, let the Europeans take care of their own problems. This really puts the British in a very, very bad situation. I mean, Theresa May geopolitically has really screwed up the UK, because under this president, Donald Trump, I mean, the UK is an afterthought. It's just, and plus they plotted against me. He's not going to, have any sympathy at all. The Europeans, they're going to get the deal they want, which means it's a bad deal for the UK. So the UK went from, being the power in between the Europeans and the Americans. Now they're going to be the odd man out. Okay, I mean it's really a catastrophe. I mean, Cameron never had to call the referendum. What a fool! And then you get this incompetent Theresa May to make it work out. I mean, this is kabuki theater at its best. Okay, I mean it's amazing. None of this should have happened. I think the UK is doing the right thing, getting out of the European Union, make the European Union reform itself, because once Brexit is done one way or another, other countries are going to take that template and they're going to force the European Union to become more democratic, okay, and listen to the people more, and deal with immigration. Again, if you live in a nice zip code, you know, you don't care about it. You have hired help, okay? So for the American media, it's primarily liberal, and they only have one topic on their mind. It's Trump in their head. And the world has changed. If I could just interject here, like, look at the amazing things going on in the Korean Peninsula. Amazing things going on. But of course, they get some kind of neocon think tank say, oh, the Koreans are developing these new missiles. Well, they might be, but that's not part of the agreement to change the fundamental order on the Korean Peninsula. See, this is a red herring they throw in all of the time. That's when the American media will get interested in foreign politics. It's all generated by these neocons that want to continue the unipolar moment for the United States, which is rapidly closing. I think I answered my 5 different questions there. Okay.
That's great, great. And on that note, Alexander, there's a question about OPEC Plus and de-dollarization. What does that mean for the dollars and the U.S. hegemony?
Right. Well, first of all, the most important thing to understand about the dollar's reserve currency status and its dominant position in the world financial markets is that it is very linked to oil. Oil is the most important internationally traded commodity. Everybody has to buy oil. If oil is only sold in dollars, that means everybody has to have dollars, because otherwise they can't buy oil. And without that oil, they can't keep their economies going. If we start to see countries paying for their oil in other currencies, then the position of the dollar as a reserve currency starts to be challenged. And in fact, we're now hearing reports that the Russians are now starting to press Western energy companies to pay for oil and gas from Russia in euros. And the Russians are already starting to make deals with other countries like India, for example. They're now starting to insist on payment in rubles, their own currency. So that does challenge OPEC Plus, the new coalition, if you like, alliance between Saudi Arabia and its OPEC allies and Russia to try and keep the oil market stable by bringing the Russians into the center of the oil market, does potentially start to challenge the future position of the dollar as a reserve currency backed on oil. So it's going to take a long time to play out. We're talking about, it's not going to happen tomorrow. We're not going to see the dollar, people dropping the dollar immediately. But be very clear about this. When countries like Russia and China, and indeed India now to some extent, are starting to move away from the dollar, that is a big event.
Peter, the sanctions, staying on Saudi Arabia, U.S. sanctions on 15 Saudi Arabian officials. Is that all for show, or is this the real deal?
It's all for show. They definitely... Bolton and people like that want to get past this story. They do not. I mean, American media is not dwelling on it at all. It's gone. It is if it didn't even happen. Okay. You had in the U.S. Congress attempts dealing with Saudi Arabia, with Yemen. Again, it's a bipartisan thing. People don't want to talk about it. They want this to go away as soon as possible. Unfortunately for the American political elite and media and the Saudis, Erdogan doesn't want this story to go away. As we predicted, this is a steady drip, drip, drip of information about the Assad. I mean, it was a couple days ago, the Turks released a photograph of the X-ray of the hit team in all of their gear that they had here. They have more, and they're going to keep dripping it out. Now, this Gulen guy looks like the Trump administration is going to give him up, because what they're basically telling the Turks is, stop doing this, okay? Stop doing it. because the real goal here, Bolton has his grand plan for regime change in Iran, and Saudi Arabia plays a key role in that. And that's why they need to make this story go away. And the Turks want to milk it for all it's worth. I mean, they might get this so-called dissident who was apparently behind the attempted coup. Erdogan wants him back. He's made that clear, and it looks like the Trump administration is going to give in to that demand. We'll see how it plays into the mix, but I mean, we'll get some kind of cosmetic stuff still about Saudi Arabia, but it's business as usual. The only real question is that will the Crown Prince be able to show his face in public outside of his own kingdom? That remains to be seen. I mean, it's going to be pretty tough, shaking the hand of a bloody hand of this guy here, because I mean, it's quite obvious from what information we have now. I think it's pretty fair to say that he had knowledge of it. Did he order it? I don't know, but there's a chain leading right to him. Okay, it's one of those typical situations. If you didn't know, you're an idiot, and if you did know, you're a liar. Okay, no one wants to be put into that position. He's in that position right now.
All right, Alexander, it was Richie on the live chat said 17 Saudis are under sanctions, actually not 15. Thank you, Richie. Alexander is the ultimate end game for Erdogan. Give me Golan, and I will stop dripping this information on the Jamal Khashoggi murder. Is that the end game?
I think that Erdogan is one of these people who plays these cards very carefully and very cleverly. He's done it with great skill, and gets what he can along the way. So he's now saying to the US, well, give me Gulen, and then they'll give him Gulen. And then he'll say, well, actually, now I want a little bit more concessions on the Kurds, and they'll give him a few more concessions on the Kurds. And then I want some help with the lira, the Turkish lira, and they'll give him some help with the Turkish lira. This is how Erdogan plays. He's never going to completely let this thing go, at least as long as he can milk it. And let's give the man his due. He plays. Yeah,
I mean, he's great at moving the goalpost. Yeah, he just keeps moving the goalpost.
Exactly. He plays this game, this sort of game, with very, very great skill. Can I just come back to one thing that Peter was saying? I mean, if we look at these sanctions, the one thing that proves that these sanctions against these 17 Saudi officials are meaningless is that the Crown Prince's name is not on them. I mean, he's not one of these people. John Bolton has come along and said, well, there's no evidence against him. Well, there was no evidence against all sorts of Russian people whom the US has sanctioned for all sorts of things. So, you don't need evidence when it comes to sanctioning Russians, but, you look the other way when the Crown Prince is involved. So, it's clearly a public relations exercise. It's clearly a diversionary exercise, these sanctions. They shouldn't be taken seriously. In fact, on the contrary, it's quite clear now that there is a concerted effort by the US and its allies to try and distance the Crown Prince as far as possible from the fallout of the Khashoggi affair. In the meantime, as we just said, Erdogan goes on playing his game. And, it's not impossible that at some point he will say, well, actually, my people have now come up with this direct order from the Crown Prince. And then we'll see what the response to that is.
All right, guys, we are going to keep this going for about another 15 minutes. Thank you, everyone, for all your questions and for joining us on this chat. We have about 400 viewers. Great turnout. Peter, are they finally going to indict Assange? This is news that is breaking as well. What do you think of that?
Well, clearly, under Attorney General Jeff Sessions, before he resigned, forced to resign, was working on a case to have some kind of indictment against him. I think it's with the Ecuadorian government more and more on board. Of course, the British would like to have this taken care of as soon as possible. Yeah, these are end days for Julian Assange, and it's such a tragedy on so many levels. It's heartbreaking for me. I mean, all the things that WikiLeaks has released have been true. Okay, not one case of they released documents that weren't actual evidence of activity, often illegal. And it is a valuable news source. You can think what you want about Julian Assange as a person, but what they have been able to do, they're important because Western liberal media won't do its job. It just won't do its job, and Julian Assange did it for them. And this is a very dark time. The darkest point of all of this is that media won't stand up and say this is wrong. Okay, and it's just simply shameful. Particularly, it's like watching the destruction of someone in broad daylight and no one says anything. That's what's really heart-wrenching for me. And I think it will come to fruition. They will get him out. They will send him to the U.S. and then we'll have a circus there. And remember, Donald Trump said, "I love WikiLeaks," which of course was completely taken out of context. He was making fun of the fact that, you know, John Podesta's emails were being made public. Okay, it doesn't mean he has any love for WikiLeaks in a more normative sense. He was just taking advantage of the political moment. But the media will use that against him, and it is his administration that's going to eventually do this. And we'll all be watching, and there will not be any official outcry at all. There'll be people like us.
Okay, Alexander, before I go to you real quick, I just want to ask Peter real quick. Tucker Carlson did kind of stand up for RT the other day. Wasn't that interesting?
Did he? I didn't see it.
Yeah, he actually stood up for RT and said what the U.S. government was doing against RT. Yeah. Yeah, it was a very interesting take. I'll put the link in the description so people can see the video.
Yeah.
But
I thought it was stunning.
I was talking about the cowardice of media, but then we have one person that in the mix, Tucker Carlson, that refuses to toe the line. I mean, that's why we watch him. Okay, that's why we watch him.
Yeah.
It's why his house gets attacked also.
Yeah, I will put the link in the video for all our viewers to see it as well. Alexander, what's your take on Assange? Once again, we turn back to the UK and to London, which seems to be the epicenter of just about every single scandal or news story taking place right now.
Well, it is. And I mean, you know, first of all, I agree with everything Peter said about, you know, the disgraceful way he's been treated. And I would add, in terms of the media, they haven't just, you know, been silent. They have betrayed him. A lot of the newspapers, The Guardian especially, benefited hugely from working with Assange. They published material he provided them, and now, of course, they've turned on him. And you know, they'll be gloating if he's sent back to the US. But the one thing that might save Assange is this political crisis in Britain. If this current government falls and we have a general election and Jeremy Corbyn becomes Prime Minister, it will be very difficult for Jeremy Corbyn to face his supporters and say to them, I am sending Julian Assange to stand trial for espionage in the United States. If Jeremy Corbyn even wants to do it, which I very strongly doubt. So we've got to look at this crisis as well in Britain, and you know, when trying to assess what might happen to Assange over the next few weeks.
So are you saying that Corbyn, that maybe the DOJ is trying to get Assange to the US out of fear that Corbyn might actually...
Absolutely. I have no doubt at all about that. If Corbyn becomes Prime Minister, it's very difficult to see Britain handing over Assange to the US. He is a well-known person with human rights views. I think he would be very resistant to doing something like that. In fact, I'm sure he would be absolutely against doing anything like that. So we've got to keep that a possibility in mind also. This is an extremely fluid and complex situation in Britain at the moment. All sorts of things are in play. We've got the European Union in play. We've got all those issues. We've got, as I said, the intelligence services, which have major concerns about Jeremy Corbyn. They had a meeting with him, by the way, the other day, in which they were trying apparently to warn him about, you know, the threats to Britain, that they're defending Britain written from and pointing at various people who they say are his friends. That meeting didn't go well, as we know, because there was an attack on Corbyn from a journalist in the Daily Telegraph who is known to have connections to the intelligence services shortly afterwards. And of course, as I said, there's the Julian Assange situation, which he will play into also if he becomes prime minister. He has to become prime minister first.
All right, we seem to have lost Peter. Hopefully he gets back on real quick for the remaining 15 minutes that we have here. But Alexander, one of the viewers wants to know if, okay, Peter is coming back on. Great. Right. What if the DOJ does indict Assange? What exactly are they charging him with?
Well, this is a huge and very good question, because, of course, what Julian Assange has done is that he has published, real material. And there has been a consistent legal view in the United States that publication of material by the media is protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. So that's the right to free speech. And that has been the consistent policy. And apparently the Obama DOJ looked at charges they could bring against Julian Assange, and they found it extremely difficult. What I think they're going to do is they're going to try to argue that Julian Assange received some of this material from the Russians and that this somehow implicates him under the Espionage Act. Whether that is a legally sustainable position, I doubt, but given the kind of atmosphere that we're seeing in the United States at the moment, we shouldn't discount the possibility that they will do that. And if they do that, one should always also remember that the kind of court he will be tried in will be one which will be very carefully chosen, with a judge and a jury which will be carefully selected in a place, perhaps near a US military base or wherever, where they're hoping that the people will be prejudiced against Assange. So it would not be a good thing, let's put it like this, for Julian Assange to go to the United States. All the odds would be stacked against him, however difficult it is to see what the case against him would be.
Yeah, I guess Peter is correct saying that if Assange does get extradited to the U.S., they'll pretty much make him disappear, I imagine.
Well, indeed. Well, people we see do disappear now in the West. I mean, exactly. You took the words out of my mouth. Where are they? I mean, so people are now starting to disappear.
Yeah, well, hopefully Peter gets back on, but in case he doesn't, Alexander, a lot of people want to know your thoughts on the EU army. Fact or fiction?
Well, fiction. I mean, I've said this many times. I mean, the idea that France and Germany can create an army between them that is going to be at all impressive or achieve anything is just nonsense. I mean, when the French and the British tried to attack Libya in 2011, they didn't get anywhere. They had to bring in the United States, and that was Libya. Now, the German army is known to be in an even worse state than the French army is. If you go to Germany, I know Germany pretty well. German people are not, frankly, into armies anymore. That's a past they want to forget. So the idea of an EU army based on France and Germany, it isn't going to work. It's like Macron all the time. He plays Napoleon, he calls himself Jupiter, he comes up with these grandiose plans, he offends Trump along the way, he opens up with this EU army idea an opportunity for Putin to troll a little. But at the end of the day, there's no reality to it.
But it's not so. I think the EU is split, Alexander. I like your comments on this. There may be the Macrons and the Merkels who are saying, yeah, let's have an EU army. And Merkel actually backed up Macron's plans. Yeah. But if I'm not mistaken, there are a lot of countries in the EU that are perfectly fine with the US presence in Europe. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, they welcome it. Can you get into that a little bit?
Absolutely. Now, first of all, I mean, when I said it would be completely ineffective and unreal, I was talking about its military capabilities. Now, as a political project, of course, it's different because, of course, Macron like a lot of people in Germany, wants to build up EU institutions as much as possible, convert the EU into some sort of super state. I mean, that's what he talks about. And having an army is what a state has, so that's its attraction to him. But other EU countries, like Poland, like Hungary, they do not want to see this at all, because they do not want the EU to evolve into any sort of super state. And countries like Poland, which have a very strong alliance with the United States, certainly will not want to see an EU defense structure appearing which rivals NATO and weakens the US commitment to what we would call, to Europe. So there will be a lot of EU states that don't like it. And one in particular, it's not going to be an EU state for very long, but Britain, which will remain a NATO state, is totally opposed to this project for precisely that reason, because it will weaken the historic link with the United States.
All right, guys. On that note, we will wrap it up. This was our first weekday live chat. We hope you guys really enjoyed it. We lost Peter 5-10 minutes ago. Hopefully he's all right. I don't know. I guess his connection cut out. But Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran in London, any last words that you would like to say before we end this this live chat?
Well, we are, very, very keen to reach out to you people and have more questions. We will answer your questions, and let's make this a really good thing every Friday, maybe, to have these weekly live chats as well as our weekend ones.
Yes, we will have our Sunday live chat as always, most likely the usual time with the usual cast and crew. Yes, thank you very much to everyone that joined this chat. We really appreciate you guys. We appreciate everything you do, sharing the site, subscribing, passing it on to your friends, sharing it on social media. Anyone that's made a donation, a super chat, bought a t-shirt, donated to PayPal or Patreon, thank you very, very much. Guys, we hope you have a great Friday, and we will catch you on Sunday for our big live chat. Alexander Mercouris in London, Peter Lavelle, who's in Moscow. I'm sure he wishes everyone a nice weekend. Guys, take care, and we will see you soon.